Sorry, is that glare really bad?
I can turn the light down further if you want.
Okay, yeah, maybe a little bit. That would be good. Thanks.
Thank you. No problem.
Yeah, appreciate
Although
it.
it might only make it worse. Hard to say.
I think it's better.
It is better.
Yeah, that's definitely better from what I can see. So I had to make a small change in the server, and it looks like the code they gave us in the platform is on the money. I'm not really sure why it was causing issues before, but essentially what we're doing here is we're setting up a server based on our app.listen function. So we'll set that to a variable called server, and then down in here we're requiring socket.io and invoking that against the server that we just created. So inside here we were responding to a connection event, and you could see just saying new connection, and then we're logging some stuff about the connection. And inside here, wow, there's really a lot of stuff here. But one thing you should notice is that there is a connection ID, and actually I'm going to change this so that we just log the ID of the connection. And then let's do something. So we have a new connection from this particular ID. It has 4 A's at the end. And I'm going to create another an incognito window to just show that we have multiple connections. Actually, before I do that, let's add to our counter. So our counter is just saying we have this many people connected to our server at this time. So each time there's a connection, I'm going to increment that counter. So we'll go counter plus plus, and then I'll say this many people connected, and then we'll log what the counter is. So right now we have one person connected. It's just in that first window. And then I'm going to connect also in this incognito window. So we'll load up that. Yeah, fancy, right? We have 2 people connected, and this is the new connection ID that I got from that. So now we've just kind of got the basic plumbing ready to go. We've got our server that can connect to the front end and vice versa. Let's set up some events. So on this socket connection, let's do a socket.emit, which means that I'm going to emit something to this specific socket that just connected to me. So we'll name this event welcome, and then I can also pass to it a data object if I want that just has some information. So we'll just say hello world in here. Save that file, and then on the front end we're going to have to be able to respond to this event as well. So instead of on greeting, we'll just call this whatever we called that. So we called it welcome. Now on the front end we're listening for an event called welcome, and when that event comes through we're just going to console log the data. So again, I could just replace this whole thing and say let's just console log the thing. Alright, so here on the front end I'm going to go actually back to the non-incognito version. I've got my console open up. I'll refresh it here. So notice how we got this console log of hello world, because right when I connected to the server, I had the server send something back to the client side, and it was the welcome event. And you see the welcome event also had some data attached to it, just the object that has hello and world in it.
In the server side, I forgot the syntax, but you're sending in a callback function, or you're sending in that object, but you could just as easily like put in a callback function that returns something, correct?
let's look at it. So in here,
Yeah, because you're sending in that JSON object. Right?
you're saying I could have made this into a callback?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
callback that returns something, right?
Why would you? I'm a little confused. Why would you want to run a callback? Because remember, we're emitting an event right now.
Okay.
So really, we're sending this information to the client side. You're not really going to want to run any kind of a callback. It's the client side that's then going to be responding to that event. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It seems like you're talking about responding to something that you're already doing. It's like, well, we're emitting this event, and why don't we respond to it at the same time? No, it's the other side that's going to respond to it.
But couldn't you want to emit some sort of a list of things, like you just want to perform some tasks and then emit something instead of just.
Well, sure. If I guess it depends on what the context is. So here we're just doing this automatically when a person first connects to the server.
Okay.
Okay. We might do things a little bit differently. Like for instance, let's say we were responding to something from the client side, and that's probably what we'll do next. Is we'll look for an event from the client. So if we want to do socket.on. And we'll just call it this event. And again, we'll console log this on the server side. So on the client side, I'm just going to send an event called this event, and then we'll have the server handle that. So in here, so we fired off this event, and we responded to it on the client side. Let's go socket.emit. And we'll just do this event, and then we'll just say some prop, some val. Okay. So when I reconnect here, notice how we also had the client emitting something to the server. So inside of our document.ready function, we're setting up a listener for a welcome event, which would be coming from the server. And then I'm also emitting an event called this event that's going to go back to the server. And then inside the server, we were listening to it there. So we've got socket.on, this event, and then we're just console logging what we got. So you can see that actually happened. Now, if we wanted to, obviously, we don't have to just console log something. We could put it inside the document itself. So if I had a div up in here, and we'll call it socket div. So when when my welcome message comes in, let's just do something where we put something inside that div. So I'll call it up, oops, like this, socket, and then we'll say the HTML is going to be you have been welcomed. All right. That's pretty exciting, right? So we got welcomed. Woohoo! So it was kind of tough to get here, but basically with sockets, we have these different types of events that we can do. And let me really quickly find broadcast. So the different things that we can do is we can broadcast, And broadcasting means that we're sending a message to everyone else except for the socket that initiated the communication there. So if I go socket.broadcast.emit, that's not going to, hopefully this makes sense. It's not going to send that event to that particular socket connection. It's going to send it to everyone else.
So it's like when you're playing a game and it alerts you that someone that your friends have just signed on.
Right, and the key thing here is that the person who just signed on, he doesn't need to get an event about that because his browser obviously knows that he just signed on, so he can just, the code can work with that. It knows that he just signed on. Everyone else needs to know that he signed on. Or another kind of example of something like that would be if you were doing a group chat and you personally have just typed in a message, your browser already knows that you've typed in this message according to how you've coded it, right? Everyone else, though, needs to be alerted to that. They need to know there's this new message in the feed. Just tack it onto the bottom of what you have so far.
So generally the way it works is right now, so the server's creating some socket, right? And then it's emitting to it just as if like a client were emitting to it too, right? But you were just doing it on the server side. So in theory, you could have one server that's creating the socket, and then another server that just connects to it and emits to it. Like you can still do that, right? Like
So a second server that's sort of acting almost like a client, you mean?
Exactly. That's what I'm just wondering, like if those two can be separated, or if there's a reason we're doing it in the same.
Well, generally, the projects that you guys are going to be working on are going to be fairly simple in the sense that we've got, a client and a server. But these assignments, you're going to want to test them with a couple different browser windows at least, to just make sure that, okay, I can get a connection over here and I can get a different connection over here, to make sure that everything's wired up the way that it should be.
And then you have a socket that's being created, right? And then basically any number of people can be connected to that particular socket, and you can, for all intents and purposes, you can just emit or listen, right? And then anyone connected to that, if you emit to it and they have that particular listener, then they'll get that message.
Right. So let's do this. Let's just practice emitting or actually broadcasting a message, and we'll show ourselves that this message is not going back to the side that initiated it. It's actually going to all the other clients. So inside of our server file here, now that we're inside a connection, right? A new connection has just happened. Let's broadcast to everyone else that a new person has joined the server. So let's go like this. We'll say socket.broadcast.emit, and then we'll call this event new user, and then I'll just pass it in a data object that has their socket ID. Socket.id. Okay, so every time somebody joins, we're going to broadcast this message, and then on the client side, let's listen for that event as well. So up here, we'll go socket.on new user, and then again, we're just going to console log out information about that new user, which would be their ID itself. Okay, so if I'm going to close out that other incognito window just for now. All right. So here inside our very first one, and we've been welcomed, but notice how we didn't get any messages about a new user because we're doing a broadcast message. So this should be sent to everyone else. So now let's open up our incognito window and start again with that and see what happens. So if I go here, localhost 3000, and then back in my original window, so that happens. So in the original window, we're finding out, okay, there was this new user and here's his ID. Versus in this other case here, when we were just emitting to the socket, this is just going straight back to the socket that we got passed in. Oops. Sorry, I meant to say in the server. So here, the individual socket, we're emitting the welcome thing to. So that's going directly back to the socket that just connected to us.
And you connect to the socket only once, right? Or is it a constant connection?
It is essentially a constant connection, yeah. And there are also other events that you can listen to as well. I don't know that it's disconnection, but there's also an event that you can listen for if somebody has been disconnected from the server.
So if we had some .disconnect and the console log telling you just been disconnected, would we see
Let's try this real quick. Let's just go through a disconnect. So there is a disconnect event. So inside of this, let's do something when a person is disconnected. Socket.on and then disconnect. So we'll just do a callback here. We're going to want to broadcast to everyone else saying that this person has left the building, essentially. So let's do socket.broadcast.emit, and then we'll say user left, and then we'll do the same thing. So we'll just pass ID was the actual socket.id. Like that. And then on the client side, again, we have to always kind of do things on both sides. So we set it up on the back end to actually send this event, and then on the front end, we want to listen for it as well. So socket.on user left, and then we'll just console log what we got. So I've got these two guys here. I've got this one. I've got my incognito window there. Okay, now
Is there a third?
If you're on this window and you see two new IDs pop up, that means there's three people.
I think that was the old incognito window, or like when you refresh, right?
83.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, you refreshed your incognito window.
And then it'll, yeah, create another one.
So if you refresh it one more time, we'd expect another ID.
that's probably what it was, a refresh on that. Yeah, so actually I'm going to refresh this and close the other one out so that we don't run into that problem. I'll refresh this one more time. Okay, so one more incognito window. Go back into the console here. And then if I go back to my window, I should have that guy there. And then if I leave, so my incognito window is going to disconnect. We'll just close it. So there we go. It's telling we logged this the exact same thing, but this was the connection action and this was the disconnection action. That makes sense. probably I should have been a little bit more explicit about that so that we could see.
So you're like,
You just put it in with the console log.
Yeah, like when we were doing this, maybe something like
ID plus
disconnected ID. I don't know. Something like that. So if we know that, so we'll do this one more time. I'll open up an incognito window. So that should be connected. Okay, and now in the incognito, let's close it out, and then we have the disconnected ID, which is the same thing. All right.
T. Davis.
T. Davis. Oh yeah, T. Davis, right. Good catch. Yeah, so those are essentially the different types of events that you guys are going to emit. You're either going to emit directly back to that individual socket, or you're going to emit something to everybody but that socket. You know, so for a group chat, maybe we want to let everybody else know that this new message has been posted. Any questions about this? Sockets are pretty cool, right? As far as, you know, you could do some very neat real-time things with them. All right, so I'm just going to